Okay, there's our glasses work. Welcome back, everybody. We did have the hourglasses calibrated, just so you know. They're accurate to 1/1000th of a second. So, why don't you tell us what's going on tonight?
Okay, so we have three objectives tonight that we hope that you leave with. The first one is that marriage is probably the most precious relationship in our lives, which is why it also can feel the most perilous. It's also unlike any other relationship. It should be, and biblically it's supposed to be grounded in a covenant, not a contract. And then we are also called to be one. We don't lose anything in that. I don't become him, he doesn't become me, but we become one as a couple. So those are the three things we hope you get from tonight.
You know, as we come in tonight, so I imagine from your discussion at the table, was there anybody who had a marriage exactly like yours? Right? No, of course not, because it's just so different. But one of the things I think makes marriage really challenging today, we have so many things coming at marriage, coming against marriage. If you think about it historically, marriage had some three very practical things. I call them the 3 Ps. One was protection, just physical protection. The second one was provision, just food and shelter and things like that. And third was good old procreation, right? Having a unit for the family. In some ways, without debating it, but in some ways, all three of those now can be substituted in our society today, or at least we give a sense they can be substituted. So there's got to be some other thing that God had in mind for marriage beyond just those practicalities. And I believe those things, number one is, Scripture says that our marriages are a symbol of God's love for us. It talks about the relationship of husbands and wives. It says, as Christ loved the church. We hear a lot about those things in Scripture. So I want us to see our marriage as not just something for ourselves, but as a model to our community and others about how God loves us. And the second is, it is a vehicle for transforming lives. There's no other relationship that will force you to confront yourself and the change you need to make in yourself other than marriage. And when you see it that way, you really kind of start into what marriage really is. Let me see if I get this remote to work again. And I cannot. So Todd is going to do it. We talked about marriage being a journey. There's a chart here. If we have any, he's a PC guy. The right-hand button on the cursor is the bottom right. And on the keyboard. On the keyboard, get your hand on the mouse. There you go. See the right-hand button? There you go. Yay! For the PC guy, got a Mac figured out. Yay! Thank you, Todd. I get to harass him. He's a good friend of mine. If you don't have to be an Old Testament scholar to know that some of these things are, we've kind of taken a model from the Old Testament. It wasn't about marriage, but it's funny how it maps what happens in marriage. The first is Eden, which I like to simply say is running around naked with no kids. Right? So it's the first part of that marriage, and it's just like, wow, everything's like really cool, there's fruit everywhere, that whole thing. Is this all our road? Forget about the fig leaves. And the second thing is, though, I'm not sure it takes that long to happen, but there's an Egypt. You think about what happened to the Jews. All of a sudden, they were pulled out of everything that they knew. They were in a strange land. They didn't know the language. They didn't know that everything was different for them, and they were basically in bondage. And they really actually even lost sight of who God was during that time. You want to take the next one?
No, you can do it.
I can do the next one, okay. Wilderness, most of us think about the wilderness as this horrible, lost place, but you think about what the Jews did when they were in the wilderness. It was 40 years of wandering around, but it was a time for them to build community, and they learned about each other, and they learned coping skills. And it said God was with them, right, by the fire and the clouds. So it was a time of building and getting themselves ready to enter into the promised land as new people than they had been coming out of Egypt. The promised land, you're not going to see us talk about it too much right away. We'll talk about it later as the weeks go forward. But the promised land is not the land of milk and honey. I don't know about you, but we don't have that yet, right? Got that. But the promised land says, I've got a better understanding of what the promise of marriage means. And what does it mean to really make promises to each other and live those things out? So we're going to talk about those things. I said this is kind of a map for a lot of people's marriage story, as it is for ours. And
Yep.
Why don't you start?
Okay. So growing up, I grew up in a family of 10 kids. My dad was a preacher. And in that growing up period. With 10 kids, you didn't, number one, you didn't have a whole lot of.
Sorry, you've lost their attention for a moment. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's a little scary. 1 of 10, you don't have a whole lot of time to talk. So you don't, I did not learn how to voice my feelings. Not only that, it was not accepted in my home. Pretty much when Daddy said something, that's the way it was. You didn't question it. You didn't even say, hey, can I just ask a question? No. It was, Dad said it, that's the way it was. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say here.
Well, you were
Yeah,
in
it
a
was-
little Baptist church one day.
I was, yeah, I grew up in Wyoming, not the Wyoming, Ohio, but the Wyoming with the deer and the antelope play. Yeah, it was, there's not a lot to do there. And I was not anxious to stay there for my entire life. High school, maybe college if I had to, but maybe not. So then, yes, I come to you.
Well, then this person showed up. This guy.
Now, trust me, I knew he was never going to stay in Wyoming for very long. Okay? He wore earth shoes. Those are the ones with the heels that go, you know, your back.
Long way. Just think Jesus of Malibu. I was a Jesus freak. I was in the Jesus movement in California, and I had like 3 part-time jobs in radio during college and afterwards, and I wanted to get a full-time job, and the recession was going on, so I ended up in Gillette, Wyoming. And I think the sheriff deputies were going to shoot me and throw me in a ditch when I first showed into town. I was just a hippie. But I went to this little Baptist church, and there were 3 girls all lined up in the couple pews in front of me, and I picked the one that I thought was the cutest and the oldest, and got it right. Our first, well, to relate to your dad though, because I was at Bible, Baptists, they go to Bible studies on Wednesday night. I'm sitting there and listening to this.
It's not just Wednesday night, it's
It's
Sunday
like every night.
morning,
Yeah,
it's
right.
Sunday night, it's Wednesday night. It's...
I'm listening to this guy, and he's just doing this whole Bible study, and I'm all right. And I asked her to borrow a pen. I'm very charming. I'm very seductive about it. I got a great method for picking up chicks. And then later she said, "What did you think of the guy's Bible study?" And being a Jesus freak, walking around the beaches of California with a Bible, I had an opinion. So I said, "Oh yeah, I was right about this, but I didn't agree with this or that." She didn't tell me that it was her dad.
But for me, that was significant because I didn't want someone who just agreed with my dad.
So our second date, if you remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the big igneous rock formation where the spaceship came in, that's where I took her on our second date. And I brought my guitar and I packed a lunch. And I did Eagles, Doobie Brothers, James Taylor. Hey, I'm good,
Except you didn't know that the altitude, he made brownies. They were not brownies, they were...
Sludge.
Yeah, it was liquid.
Yeah. But anyway, later that day, I'll be kind of corny about it. We sat by this little stream, throwing sticks out there and watching him race down the stream, and I kind of reached around to give her a kiss, and I got to tell you, she had my heart the second date. I said, this is a pretty, let me see what I want to say. Anyway, you get the idea. I thought, okay, there's something really different about her, and she's pretty special, and you never know, I think this might be it.
But for me, yeah, my ticket out of town. Literally, that's why I went out with him. I thought, this guy will never stay here very long, and I know that he will be moving on from Wyoming. And 6 months later, we did.
We did. We packed everything in a small U-Haul and off we went to the big city, to LA, and my first job in radio, full-time back in that market. And I got to tell you, I don't know what images you have of people working in radio, but you don't make much money unless you're in Los Angeles, and I was one of the outlying markets, so we did not have any money. I mean, we seriously did not have any money. My dad picked an apartment out for us. He lived in Southern California. I called ahead and said, pick an apartment out for us. When we get there, we got to move in somewhere. He must have picked this place on a warm, sunny afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Because by the time we got there, I found out that the girls walking down the street in spandex were not going to the health club. And the drug lord of the street put out the order to leave her alone because we clearly had no reason to be there. So it was a pretty interesting experience. But you know, as hard as it was, that was really cool. And that was our Eden in a way. But all we had was each other. It was you and me against the world, and not having any money. And I'll just mention, because I think this is really important for all of us. We had a couple that God parachuted into our marriage named Bob and Emily Barnes. I'm gonna start crying because she just passed away 3 weeks ago. They were maybe 15 years ahead of us in our marriage, but we just thought they were like, oh wow, they got like a brutal marriage, you know. And they were so wonderful to us. And I think in many ways, you look back, they really carried us through those early years and taught us what marriage was.
Well, and for me, they were really impactful because I had left my parents. They were not anywhere close. And Paul's parents lived an hour away, and I really wasn't very close to them. So to have someone who could show me how to be a wife and a mother eventually was very powerful for me.
When our first child was born, and I realized I couldn't, when I fell asleep on the Foothill Freeway driving into Hollywood at 3 o'clock in the morning, I realized it was not a good combination to be a lifelong dad. So it broke my heart. I left my career in radio, and I kind of went corporate. And I did pretty well. I was a little crazy. I would always take on the hard stuff, and always raise my hand, to do things. And with that comes promotion, and with that comes pay raises, and with that comes moves.
At least for us, it was moves.
Yeah, for us it was moves. Yeah, and so we moved a lot. I mean, we moved, Santa Monica, then Connecticut, and then North Carolina, and Dallas, and then I moved to a different company in Louisville. And I'm just rocking. I mean, this is great. I mean, for the first time, after so many years of not having any money at all, the money started to come in. Not, bucket full, but all of a sudden I felt like, okay, I'm being a good husband. I'm taking care of my family. Never occurred to me that wasn't the right thing to do. In fact, I think I took a lot of pride in the fact that I was taking care of my family the best as I knew how.
And for me, my mom had followed my dad wherever he wanted to go, so that's all I knew. That was what a good wife was supposed to do. I had never heard them argue or even discuss moves, so that was not really anything I did either. But to move and to move two little girls to places where you don't know a soul, he had people he knew at work. So he went in and worked and did his little thing, and I sat there at home and had a hard time. Especially, it was about every 2 years that we moved. So you're just barely getting to know people. You're just barely saying, okay, these people can be my friends and I can relate to them or share with them. And whoop, you're gone. And you got to start over. And it was really, really tough.
Well, I kind of woke up to that a little bit. In Louisville, I blew up my corporate career. I had a way of doing that. Self-destructed. And I started my own business, and I told Carol, I said, look, my business can be anywhere, so it's going to be here. This is our home. So I promised her that we'd be staying in Louisville. And how many of you have your own businesses? Nobody? A few bits. You know what it's like with that first client, like you cling on to them like a drowning man hangs onto a life raft. So my first 2 or 3 clients, man, I did anything they needed me to do, which in their case was they wanted me all the time. And I mean like DC, Atlanta, later in Vegas. I mean 2 weeks at a time. I was in Hong Kong for 6 weeks, one time on 1 week's notice. I was just gone all the time and just kind of, I might as well just airmail the paychecks home, and I'd come home every couple of weeks and couldn't figure out why I didn't feel part of the family.
And to have him then parachute back in for 2 days or 3 days was really difficult. The girls and I had really established our own life. Where I made the decisions, we decided when we would eat, we decided what we ate. And then he came in and said, oh, let's do something different, or let's do it this way, or Carol, why are you doing this? So there became a real wall.
I never would have thought that we would call ourselves a commuting marriage, but that's basically what it is, not a long-distance marriage, emotionally, physically, and every other way. So, and sometime during that time, when all this was going on, Carol's mom and dad, they just kind of ran out of money, ran out of everything, and they just needed, you know, someplace, and that's what family's for. So we agreed to have them move in with us. And, you know, I have to, Carol's mom's just, she's amazing. I love her to this day. Her dad was a different guy. And of course, he didn't like, you already knew that I didn't like his Bible studies, right? So we were already in trouble. But after a while, I kind of felt like, am I married to my wife, or am I married to the daughter of my mother-in-law? And that just kind of added to the, you know, to the isolation. Over time, he had Parkinson's, and he was on some medications, and you can just kind of imagine where it went. It just got really, really hard after a while, to the point where we just really kind of had to have it out, and we decided that it was time for him to move to a nursing home. And this was right about the time my daughter was getting ready to get married, and our younger daughter was going ready to college, so we had a lot of loose parts going on. But that was the big decision, was to get him to the nursing home. And pretty quickly after that, the phone started to ring, and you know, the conversation changed and got darker. And he talked about life didn't matter to him and all that. And I was out in Vegas at the time, working with a client. I'll never forget, just getting ready to get on the elevator, and the phone rang, and Carol called.
And Daddy had committed suicide. A month before our daughter's wedding. So, talk about, I'm supposed to be helping my daughter in the most, you know, coolest time of her life up to then, and yet at the same time, I am struggling with guilt that I didn't go see him enough. Anger, oh my gosh, I was so angry at him, so angry that he did this to us, that it was not a good time for me. I didn't do very well.
And I was furious. And I wasn't even guilty about being furious, like, well, what have you done to my family? Not realizing that I had done a lot of it myself. So we, a few months after that, we weren't close during that time. I think we were both trying to hang on to some stuff. A few months after that, my client in Vegas really was coaxing me to come out there. You know, made a pretty sweet deal for me to come out there. And I decided, here's my chance to make up for some of the financial gaps. So I called Carol and I said, we're moving again.
And he likes to say he asked me, but he didn't. He said it just the way he said it. We're moving. And I said, no. You promised me. How can you do this to me? My dad just died. How can you rip me away from my friends? And at the time I had this little red convertible. And I got in it, and I really didn't care what happened, honestly. I think I flew down the freeway at 100 miles an hour. That's not who I am, really. I mean, I'd like to drive fast, but
She goes 80.
but that was over the top. But it was the only way, because I didn't know how to say to him with words, I'm mad at you, I'm angry at you. It was the only way I knew to get that anger out of me, was to just let it blow out there, because that was supposedly safe. So I don't think he even knew about the car for months. Nothing happened, but I didn't feel safe enough. I didn't feel like I knew how to tell him that this was a, I can't think of the word, a breakage of a promise.
In the meantime, you know, honestly, I wanted my preacher kid back. So I cooked for you.
He did. Every meal, folks, every breakfast. He didn't do lunch because he was not at home, but every dinner he cooked.
But no, I knew something was off, and I just wanted to get back to something that we used to know. And we talk about the wilderness, but that was the beginning of our wilderness. It was a really healthy exercise, sitting out there in Vegas with really nothing for you to do, and nothing we wanted to do out there. It really was a chance for us to start talking again and rebuilding. We're going to share a lot more later about our wilderness experience, but it was interesting. I think it was a God thing, because just a few months later, the situation I was out there working on, it all kind of blew up, and we already knew that could happen, and so a few months later, back we were heading back to Louisville, or actually to this area now, to kind of put some things back together, and I think for the first time in a long time, we realized we had something we really want to work on, so that's, is that all?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it.
That's kind of our, we had the chart there earlier, but it's in your books. That's our story kind of up through maybe to wilderness. And what we'd like you to do now is, you know, we had that initial tell me a little bit about your marriage, but we want you to take some time now at the table, about 5 minutes or so per couple, and dig a little bit deeper and look at that chart and maybe share with the table some points where you think you are. Where have you been in your marriage? Where do you think you are now? Do you feel like you're moving forward? Do you feel like you're stuck? But you don't have to go all the way to the promised land, but have a little more of a discussion now about where you think you are in that marriage. We'll come back after that.